Welcome to the Truman Charities Podcast. I am Jamie Truman, your host. Did you know that 1 in 4 women and 1 out of 9 men are victims of domestic abuse? I spoke with Dr. Ludy Green today. She has dedicated her entire life to helping victims of domestic violence achieve independence. She has written a best-selling book, Ending Domestic Violence Captivity, a guide to economic freedom, and is the producer and host of a podcast, Ending Domestic Violence, and of course, the founder of Second Chance Employment Services. We talk all about the statistics of domestic violence and the number one reason women end up staying with their abuser and why sometimes they even go back to their abuser. And I hope that you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. So thank you, Dr. Ludy Green, for coming on to talk to us today.
Thank you so much, Amy, for having me.
Of course. So, I want to start out with your background because you've wrote a very successful book, Ending Domestic Violence Captivity, and you also have your own podcast on domestic violence called Ending Domestic Abuse. And I want to know a little bit about yourself and why you're so passionate about this particular subject.
Well, one of the things that came to me very importantly, and that's what I'm so passionate about, when I was very young, at the time I was going to the university in Washington, D.C. and working in Capitol Hill, I had the opportunity to see that they were looking for, in a shelter for battered women, they were looking for volunteers. And it was called My Sister's Place in D.C. So I went there and I had a chance to start volunteering a couple of days a week and seeing how women were struggling so much and coming to the shelter and then going back to the abuser. And that made me think, why are they coming and why are they leaving and going back to the abuser? And that's what it caught my mind. And I'm like, there gotta be some solution, because why are these people coming back? And then I realized that financial dependency was what were keeping these victims with them, with the abuser. So from there, I came up with this concept that is there any employment agency in the United States for victims of violence? I started asking around through friends, through people. And through the years, I started building this whole concept and this whole business plan to create it, because there was not one in the United States after all that research I have done. And that made me more passionate about it, and realizing that if I bring financial independence to victims through employment, they will be able to escape abuse.
Yeah. So how have you been able to do that for these women?
Well, how we did it is I founded an organization in 2001 called Second Chance Employment Services, the first and only employment agency in the U.S. for victims of violence. Through that, we had partnerships with shelters in the area, then around the United States, and also with companies, corporations, hospitals, universities. I mean, the largest in the country, and as small ones as well. But we work in partnership, and they were able to give us first-time priority for women who were victims of violence.
Mm-hmm. And what type of employment are you helping these women obtain?
It was very interesting, very diverse. At the beginning, it may have been just, customer service work, can be even housekeeping. Then after time, people start realizing that we existed, we were there. I have gotten people who were professors. I have gotten even doctors and OBGYN doctor. I have got women who had PhDs, MBAs. I mean, we got consultants in big firms like Booz Allen and Hamilton. We work with people with Accenture. We have worked with people with IBM. I mean, all over the place.
So I want to talk a little bit about some of the survivors that you spoke with. Now, I know on your podcast, I've listened to several of your episodes, and you have some really inspiring stories from women. And I know this may be a kind of a hard question, but can you tell us any stories of the survivors of women that you've spoke to that really have had an impact on you?
Yes.
And inspired you?
Mm-hmm. There was this lady who came to Second Chance through My Sister's Place. Was one of the local shelters, the one that I used to volunteer. She basically was a local, and she was married to a very prominent lawyer from one of the largest firms in the United States. And they also have international representation. It was unbelievable. She decided to stay home mother. She got some background as administrative assistant, but her passion and real career was painting, art. So She created her little studio in the house when she stayed home mom. She had the 2 kids. And she created this studio to teach little children how to paint. Mm-hmm. Well, her husband, through the years, started changing and became very controlling, very isolating. So she had no family around. She told her story to us. And he got one day very upset. He was drinking, very upset, very mad. And he said, you're taking home these children that have no attention. He started breaking everything. He destroyed the little studio she had in her house. And basically, she said all these things that I remember one by one. He chained her and he beat her in her bed. And it was horrendous. She said the humiliation she lived and the way she was treated since then, she couldn't cope with it. So she went on this for several months and she didn't know who to talk to. So she was, trying to see other people in the community, trying to see what can she do. And she identified the shelter. So the only thing she couldn't take her children because she will take her children. The husband was a lawyer. They will accuse her that she was kidnapping the children. So her only way to do it was to escape. And she ran away. So she ended up in the shelter. And from there, they referred her to us because the shelter was the referral to us, to our organization. That's how we got to know her. An amazing woman. Couldn't see her beauty or her strength at the moment that I met her. It was a very sad the way she presented, but we found resources from hairdressers, Christophe Salon, who was very, very famous at that time there in DC and Emmett Street, who fixed her hair, changed the color, did a beautiful haircut. From people who provide us suited for change at that time, they gave us the clothing, so she looked beautiful. And then we set her up and secured her a job interview with the World Bank, where she basically created and started her career. But the most important and impacting part of that story was that she never gave up her dream of paint. And she told me after a few months working in this place as an administrative assistant, she said, I want to paint. Is there any opportunity? Do you know of anybody? And I knew someone, one of our board of advisors, who knew people at the National Museum of Women in the Arts. So we were able to present her painting. She was able to present it. And currently right now, she paints. She travels to Italy for what I know. And she has been a spokesperson to us for years. And she rescued the children. Her life was put together and everything came to be in place. And now she's a happy married woman. So that's one of the most impacting stories, because after being beaten the way she was, she lost all self-esteem. I mean, the person that I saw afterwards, after the years, and the person that I saw the first day I met her, I cannot believe how she recovered herself and is who she is right now, and an example to so many.
Wow. That sounds like such a transformation.
Yes.
So I want to talk a little bit about some of the statistics of domestic abuse and maybe things that the general public doesn't know about what's going on in the U.S.
Yes. So we have 1 out of 4 women are victims of domestic violence in this country, and 1 out of 9 men. Latest statistics on the 2023, you can find on the Department of Justice. So that means about 10 million women and men a year we have who are victims of violence. I mean, it is really a disease in society. It's another pandemic.
Yeah. Gosh, 1 in 4 women and
yes.
1 in 9. I had no idea. That is, yeah.
It has increased, stunning. Yes. Through the year has increased. And basically since the pandemic, it became worse as people became trapped. They couldn't go outside. They isolate themselves. I mean, you are in small places. They can't cope with the stressors, and domestic violence rises.
Yes, I have talked to several other people that are running nonprofit organizations, and they did say that there's been an uptick in abuse and domestic violence and child abuse and so on since the pandemic because of those issues. So I want to talk a little bit about your book. So let's talk about when you decided to write it. Tell us a little bit about it and what people can get out of reading your book.
So basically, after serving for over 10 years in the organization, I started thinking, it's not just about my leadership, but it's about sharing with others. And I needed to pass the leadership into others. And I felt it would be very important how I was inspired to create this whole model, which is very successful. And it was tested by several universities. The program was tested, so it came out to be very successful. I said, I need to do something about it. So a book came to me. I'm like, I need to write a book, compile the information, the data, the stories of the women who can write of their own, and as well the model, which is very important because I thought other social entrepreneurs, especially in the schools, going to universities or colleges, we can find social entrepreneurials, people who want to create organizations to help others. So I said this can be an inspiration to them. So the book is based on that. I share the model of the organization, and I share the stories of the women. And it's very important. Why? Because social entrepreneurs, youngsters who really have dreams and they want to make the difference in the world, they can create second chances, wherever they are, because it's a real business. It is not like I was a volunteer. I volunteer, of course, at the beginning, but then you become your own employee. You have your own employees. It's a whole business. It was an employment agency for victims of violence.
Wow. And so how did you choose the stories that you were going to put in your book?
Well, it basically had to be more like random. We felt like we can tell people that, for example, Native American can be somebody Hispanic community, can be women from high stratum with a lot of money, people who have a PhDs, women who may be in certain industries that other may not have. So it has to be very diverse. That was very, very important. And they're willing to be in depth to share it.
Yeah, I do think that's really important. And I love that you did that within your book, because then someone can always relate to someone that's speaking in your book. So I do love that you have all of that diversity in there. And let's talk about why you decided to create your podcast. Tell me a little bit about that. I absolutely love it. I've listened to, as I said, several, and I'm subscribed, and I look forward to each episode. Of course.
That is so great to hear that, and it's growing, and I'm very excited about that. And our guest is unbelievable. As you may have listened to some of them, they're women, high profile women. I mean, like the former, like currently, she's the president of the TED Talk. She was abused as a child. I cannot believe she used to be the former president of CNN, if I'm not confusing. Yes,
Wow.
I am in shock. And women who were presidents and CEOs of big corporations, and they share their story there. And they told me this is the first time I'm sharing my story because they were ashamed. And this is unbelievable because it has helped others understand. So the story behind this podcast was we were all in lockdown in the houses, remember, in March 2020. And basically I was in the house, and one day a note was slipped through my door. A note from a lady, a woman, with a note saying, "My husband is going to kill me, please help me." And she put her name and a number. And I go to my husband, and he said, Ludy, you need to be careful right now. I mean, they're telling all of us who have to be in lockdown. We can't, we can be going out, and who are you going to meet? But I said, this is someone in the neighborhood, I'm sure. Has to be, and then I decided, well, what happened if that happened to me or my child? I started thinking, I mean, this can be a real story. Why will somebody write something like that if it's not real? So I decided to place a call. And this lady said, let's meet in this corner. I met her in a corner close to my house. It was in my neighborhood. And she showed me her neck. She had a cat, a horrendous cat that her husband had caused. And she said the reason she's reaching out for help is because he has picked up the son and threw him against the wall. A little boy, 4 years old. And he had concussion, was very sick, and she couldn't take it anymore. She said that it was increasingly changing since his business was hemorrhaging. The business was hemorrhaging, like losing money in his business. He started drinking a lot. They were isolated. She didn't have her family here. The family are from Philadelphia. So there was no chance. At that point in time, I didn't know how to do it, to be honest. I got desperate myself because I felt, why if I'm in that situation of this lady? And the only thing I could do was I reach out to people who have helped me previously with my organization, Second Chance. So I reach out to the community, and we help. And we got her to her family, and we got her with a child. But we have the proof. We guide her on what to do, taking pictures, having all the evidence. Because if not, she can be accused as kidnapping. All these things that happen. So she was the story behind Mama Ending Domestic Abuse podcast. And from there, I said, what about if I call the office of the mayor's office, the chief of police, and during this time, they may be able to assist in any way they can. So they were wonderful. They were positive. So we created this partnership. And we got even help if we needed like a car police here outside the house and help during that time for a few months. They were about 6 months, 5 to 6 months. And from there, I said, well, this podcast, people can write it. If we have a number, they can email us, and we can find out about how can we help them. So it became a resource, a virtual resource. So we've been helping people since. So during the pandemic, we helped about 7 women during the time, like the first year. Yes, from different neighborhoods. And interestingly enough, people who have helped before with my nonprofit, they have helped me with their homes. They gave me their homes. They gave me their, like 1 bedroom, some of them because their children went to college. Some of them, they provided their basements. So we have been able to keep, and still now we're doing that, helping women stay there. From there, we're trying to find resources that they might need a psychologist, they may need jobs, and we just do it, as one woman at a time.
Wow. Oh my gosh, I started tearing up listening to that story because I have a 3-year-old. So there's just the thought of just that little boy, it just makes me so sad. And I'm so glad that you were able to help her when she was really in such desperate and dire need. Tell me a little bit about how you see the future of your organization.
Well, the goal is to expand, and this podcast needs to take a national direction. That's what I wanted. And we have right now impacting the areas of Miami areas. We have been involved in New York City, where I'm very, very involved, and of course, DC, and hopefully get more partners, get as well sponsors, people who really believe on this, and then expanding our staff as well, people who are working for us, and then volunteers. During this Domestic Violence Awareness Month, I'm getting as many volunteers as we can so they can spread the word, and then others can continue, doing this work and help us and helping these victims who they're trapped in abuse situations.
And then I wanted to know, how could someone help a woman that has been a victim of domestic violence?
Somebody who is currently a victim of violence, or who has been before?
Who has been. So say that someone is, a friend of yours, confides in you.
How do we start?
Right. Where does someone start? You want to help them, but you just don't know.
Well, the first thing is you need to listen. Never give advice. We can't, because they're hurting so much. We need to acknowledge their feelings. We need to believe them. Truly, and they need to feel that we're believing them, because many of them, they doubt. They don't know who to share. And by the moment they're sharing, by the moment you're listening to them, you're giving them a chance so they can be able to think it through, brainstorm with you, and be able to make a decision. Because at the end, they are the ones that say, I'm leaving or not. It's not as simple as saying you have to leave, this is time. No, they are the ones that make the decision, and they need to find out how. So you will help as a resource by listening, by identifying resources that you can keep at hand. For example, you can have a 1-800 hotline, the national hotline on domestic violence, have it at hand. You can have resources through your faith-based communities. There are so many around the whole United States. Then you can identify ways of shelters. There may be some shelters, or contact us. You know what? Contact us, to be honest, because the community is immense, and people are helping from different states. I can't believe it, how they have reached out to us from other states to ask for help, and we have been able to connect them.
Yes. And how can people get in touch with you?
Oh, they can go to ludygreen.com. That's a website. They can find us to Spotify and the Domestic Abuse Podcast. And we have a way that, there's like an email, they can contact us. We have a hotline. And that's how we are, we're in touch with them.
Oh my gosh. So, Dr. Green, before I let you go, is there anything that we haven't covered that you think someone should know?
Yes, I want each one of you to know how important it is to have your eyes open. Please think about others in your community. When you go to your faith-based communities as well, look at others. If there's any different in their behaviors, if something you see different on people, reach out, be a friend, and extend your helping hand to others.
So when you're saying people look around and kind of pay attention to other people's behaviors, what do you mean by that? What are some of the signs?
People change. For example, there may be a person who has always looked all put together. Suddenly, they're all down. They don't fix themselves. Teary eyes, red eyes, not smiling like before. They're like sad. or also avoiding seeing you, isolating themselves. People change when they go through this type of trauma.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Green, for coming on. You are doing some absolutely amazing work. I love your podcast, and I hope that everybody listening will absolutely subscribe and, of course, purchase your book, because you have so much knowledge and information that I think that we should know, because honestly, I'm kind of taken back at the statistics that you gave me. And so this is a real problem that people need to know about and gather around and help these women as a community. So thank you so
Jamie,
much.
thank you so much for the work you all are doing by spreading awareness through this very, very important problem that people need to know that we have in this world, not in this community or this country, but around the world.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks again. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in to another episode of the Truman Charities podcast. Until next time. If you liked this episode, please make sure to rate and review our podcast. That is how more people learn about the Truman Charities podcast and our organization. And to make sure you don't miss any of our future episodes, subscribe. If you'd like to follow Truman Charities, you can follow us on Facebook at Truman Charities, Instagram at Jamie_Truman Charities, and check out our website, trumancharities.com.